All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us on our third and final installment of this Sunday night seminar series, Conversations Matter. To pick up where we left off 2 weeks ago, just as a bit of a review, because we didn't meet last week, but we left off with discerning the need of the moment. What Paul talks about what Paul means when he says that our words should fit the occasion. So determining what the need of the moment is how we best fit the need of the moment, right? So the types of needs, we have our encouragement or support, rebuke or correction, advice, counsel, and to commiserate. Does anyone need a refresher on any of those, or? Yeah? All right. Encouragement or support, phrases like, God promises to bring good from this will work out for good. If you need anything, I'm here. Rebuking or correcting, we mentioned not necessarily that this is harsh or rude or necessarily very challenging, but just correcting their line of thinking in a way that is more consistent with biblical thinking and patterns. So, maybe the Bible doesn't promise that life will be easy. We've all heard this one, life isn't fair. You don't know why they did what they did. You can't just assume that there was their motivation or that's what they meant when they said this, right? Maybe just that correcting is you're assuming a lot of information. You don't have all the information, so maybe just waiting till you collect more data. That type of correcting. We're not always talking about rebuking or correcting. That's just straightforward. You're wrong. Maybe they just handle things differently than you do. We talked about speaking the truth in love, especially in this when this is the need of the moment. But if it's not said kindly, it's not said in love, right? Because love, speaking the truth in love means speaking the truth motivated by love, motivated by investing in someone else's Godward movement. So if in your rebuke, correction, advice, or counsel, any of those, you're not motivated by their Christ-likeness, their growth in godliness, then it's not biblical, right? And even if it is truth, it's not said in love. And then commiserate. Sometimes the need just calls for someone to be there and to say, hey, that stinks. I'm sorry you're going through that. Like Job's friends, right, who were there for 7 days without saying a word, as was custom of the day, but still a good lesson to learn that sometimes it's just helpful just to be there. So, discerning the need is hearing the heart. Luke 6:45 says, the good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of the evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaks. The NIV translate that last phrase, for the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. All right? So this is critical to understand in order to address the right areas. We need everything on the surface, everything they're saying, and this has been mentioned in here before, everything that's being said is a sign. It's meant to point you to something else, something underlying that is the real issue, right? We cannot fully know what is in the heart of man without some expression of it. We can't see the heart. We can't look inside someone. We can't read minds. But thankfully, every expression that we display is to some degree, barring some disorder of some sort. The feelings that we feel, the words that we choose to say, the ways that we respond and react to things, the behaviors that we display, these are expressions of the heart. Right? These aren't disconnected from your desires, what pleases you, your motivations, and things like that. So when we're listening for the heart, we're listening with an understanding that the words they're saying are connected to something much deeper. Right? And at all of our core, all of our deepest root is what pleases us, what desires we have, what motivates us. And it's safe to say most of the issues that you're going to be addressing in these conversations you have are going to find their roots in some expectation they had, some desire they had that wasn't fulfilled or wasn't met, or something along those lines. So listening and understanding to not just the words, but what's connected to those words. So if we went back to our exercise from a couple weeks ago, I'll read it again just to refresh your memory. But listen, what is my heart telling you? I'm not really doing okay. I don't think I'm cut out for marriage. My wife is always upset with me, and I have no idea why. I'm really confused about that. It doesn't seem like she should be mad at me because I don't really think I've done anything wrong, but I must be doing something wrong. I guess this is just what marriage looks like. I'm pretty tired of it, though. I'm tired of being confused and walking on eggshells, feeling so tense and anxious all the time. I thought marriage was supposed to make life easier, not harder. We've been going to church a lot, and that hasn't helped. So I don't think God is the help we need. I don't know. I'm tired. It's all very exhausting. I keep telling myself it'll get better, but I know it won't. First of all, what types of things are we listening for or are we hearing to help us discern the need to hear the heart? Okay, so emotions?
That can cause the feeling of being out of control, chaotic.
Okay. Yep, right. So what else are you hearing in the words that I'm saying that would come across as expressions of my heart, or what my heart is really trying to say without me using those words specifically? Okay? Okay. Yeah. So what then there is the issue of the heart? This isn't going according to my plans. Okay, selfishness. I expect things to go the way I had planned for them to go. Good. Anyone else? Okay. Well, then we'll leave it at that. Words that belong to the wind. Is anyone familiar with this phrase from the Bible? It's not a very well-known one, but it's in there. It's from Job. It's in Job 6, chapter 6, verse 26. Job, in one of his monologues here, he says, "Do you think that you can reprove words when the speech of a despairing man is wind?" The NASB translates it this way: "Do you intend to rebuke my words when the words of one in despair belong to the wind?" So, any idea, any thought what Job is trying to get across there? What accusation he's levying?
Chapter 6. Then Job answered, "Oh, that my grief were actually..."
What do you guys think? Job is saying.
This kind of sounds like the hot air type thing.
Okay. Keep going on that.
Just talking to the earth.
Okay. Do you intend to rebuke my words when the words of one in despair belong to the wind?
It dissipates.
Okay. Yeah. It's not grounded too much. Right. So what does Job then take that further? Finish that logic. The things that belong to the wind are tossed, to and fro in the wind with a light breeze. What is he saying about the words of a man in despair?
Don't read too much into them, and don't hold it too heavily.
Yeah. Yeah, don't read too much into it. One commentator puts it this way: "Do you intend to reprove words, some passionate expressions of mine in this desperate condition, as if they were certain indications of reigning impiety and atheism? A little candor and charity would have served to excuse them. Shall a man's spiritual state be judged of by some rash and hasty words, which a surprising trouble extorts from him? Is it fair? Is it kind? Is it just to be criticized in such a case?" Go ahead, Nancy.
I was just looking at, the CBD translation.
Okay.
And it considers this showing a sign of a hopeless man.
Okay. Yeah, I would lean more towards the idea that I'm hurt, and hurt people, and they hurt people, yeah, and they say things that they don't really mean, or words that aren't necessarily a true expression of their heart. So, if we just talked about out of the mouth, or out of the abundance of a heart, the mouth speaks, then how is it that words can belong to the wind? If what you say in the midst of a struggle and challenge or conflict is an expression of your heart, then what are we to do with words that belong to the wind?
So I have this expression that I use for myself and with the boys. It's like, oh, words belong to the wind. Well, don't say that. You know, my memory's not with me, but you know, hey, things that are kind and true and whatever, these are things you should think about. Why are you thinking about wind things? So, life can be miserable, and expression, and for the boys too, is like, listen, if you're miserable, fine, take your pity moment and be like, "Buh," and then get over it and drive on, right? And so I would call Job experiencing a pity moment here, where he's just like, man, what's the point? I'm miserable. Right, just don't state it. Well, you shouldn't have ever said the wind words to begin with. What do you want me to do? Not be miserable? That's not realistic.
Yeah, right. And were we able to bridle the tongue, we would be perfect men and women, right? And that's what Job is saying here, though, is that I'm hurt. I'm in despair. And are you, like this commentator puts it, are you going to call me an atheist because I said some words of doubt and hopelessness? And one right after another. Remember, all this while he was still speaking, the next thing happened. And while the visitors were still there, the next thing happened, right? Talk about despair. We're probably all going to have a few thoughts running through our mind if that was our situation. And so Job says, I'm a man in despair here. Some of these things aren't really reflections of who I am or what I truly believe. Because we know who Job was and what he truly believed. Rob.
I'm reading from, there were some notes in my Bible about this, and Job is talking about being dismissed by his friends. I mean, they haven't proven that, or disproven the fact that he's saying he's innocent. All you've done is dismiss my innocence because you've got this theory about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they definitely have some preconceived notions. So, if all words come from the heart, then how can words belong to the wind? Is that an inconsistency irreconcilable, or can both be true? Okay? All right?
Relating this to listening,
Mm-hmm.
and someone that we're talking to is never anyone that can't listen to every word they're saying because noise.
Yeah, absolutely. Most of the time, people with whom you're speaking, when they're going through these certain situations, they're figuring it out as well, right? This may be the first time they've talked about it. This may be the first time they've really put effort into trying to piece this thing together and to try and process this thing. So sometimes it's just word vomit, right? It's just words that are coming out as they're thinking out loud, basically. Piper says there are enough words premeditated and studied that need our rebuttal, but not every despairing heresy blurted out in the hour of agony needs to be answered. There are words with roots in deep error and deep evil, but not all gray words get their color from a black heart. Some are colored mainly by the pain, the despair. And that's John Piper. And so if we go back to our hypothetical situation that we've been working off of the last couple weeks, had I said something like, I wish marriage was never invented, or she's the worst person I've ever met in my life, right? I mean, we have to see that that's not fully rooted, at least in truth, right? Because it can't possibly be that the person I'm talking about is the worst person I've ever met in my entire life, right? Or it can't possibly be that we would take this idea of I wish or marriage should have never been invented and look at all the happy marriages around us and say, well, you know, I still think you guys should have never gotten married, right? So it's those types of words. Now, it doesn't refute the fact, though, that everything we say is a reflection of or an expression of something in our heart. We just have to find what it's connected to, right? So if I do say words that are for the wind, they're not totally toss-away words, but they're just not to be taken at face value, right? And so if I said, I wish, life wasn't supposed to be this hard, no, that's not good. Hold on. See, I'm trying to go off script here, but I have it in my notes. I should just go with that. All right, let's go with this. Someone shared with me a time that they told someone, I'm sorry for their loss after they had lost a loved one. And someone went up to them and said, I'm sorry for your loss. And their response was, I don't care about your feelings, right? So are we going to take that and say, hey, I'd like to pull you aside for a second. I think we should talk about that. I'm trying to show you that I care for you, and I want to commiserate with you. I want to love you. I want to bear this burden with you. And you're just telling me you don't care about my feelings? No, that's probably not what that person is actually saying, and it's still not disconnected from their heart. But what's that? I don't care about your feelings. What is that an expression of? What is their heart telling you? They're hurting. They're in pain. Right? The pain is so hard they can't even imagine spending any of time or energy on someone else's thoughts and feelings right now, right? So are you guys following that? Words that are for the wind are not necessarily disconnected from our heart. They are still expressions of our deepest desires and pleasures, but they don't always connect at face value. Does that make sense? Okay. So it makes things a little bit harder, but it makes us much more effective. Yes?
Yes, Bob brings up a good point, because in the context of those verses, he is saying, don't dismiss me. And what you're saying is I don't necessarily need to respond, but I don't dismiss where your words are coming from either.
Yeah, if someone is throwing out words for the wind, we don't dismiss them because we know they don't necessarily mean them. What we're gaining from that is this person is deeply hurt, right? This person is seriously going through something. If the words that are coming from their heart are this sharp and maybe offensive, then this person is in pain, right? So good. Any other thoughts or questions on that? Did that confuse anyone of that muddy any waters? Yeah, Russ.
I had a verse that came to mind. It took me a second to find it, but like we look at Job, and it's like, oh, Job's troubled, and what a human thing. But you look at John 12:27, where he's about to go through pretty much the end, and Christ says, now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour, but for this cause came I unto this hour. And it's like, the statement is not like, should I say save me? No, what a ridiculous thing. I mean, it's stated as though I could verily say this because I'm so troubled, but I'm recognizing that there's a purpose in this. It's like the mere statement of, should I say God save me from this hour? It's like even Christ in his deific humanity expressed with words these, and I'm troubled and I'm just going to say some stuff, but in his perfection he recognized, and yet
in that he's the ultimate counselor. He's able to provide his own counsel as he's working these things out, right? Good. Yeah, that's a good point. So we had mentioned at the very beginning of our seminar that one of our objectives was going to be able to be effective and move forward in spite of discomfort, right? Because most likely, it's going to be uncomfortable, And the first point we want to make about that is that it's supposed to be, right? It is supposed to be uncomfortable. The language of the New Testament overwhelmingly suggests that other people's discomfort is a place for us to join in with fellowship and relationship, not a place for us to stay away from. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Bear one another's burdens. If one member suffer, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. We who are strong have an obligation to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. Paul says, yet it was kind of you to share my trouble. Paul urges the Philippian church to be glad and rejoice with him, even if he is to be poured out as a drink offering. As a defense for himself, Job says, did I not weep for him whose day was hard? Was not my soul grieved for the needy? Right? So even as a defense for himself, as trying to make sense of the situation he's in, one of his defenses is, was I not empathetic? Did I not care for those deeply, for those who were in those types of situations, whose souls were grieved? Did not my soul grieve with them? Right? So that's one of Job's points of defense, of argument, is I'm not altogether sure I should be going through this, and here's one of the reasons why I think so, right? Because this is one of the things that makes me, as far as I'm concerned, a halfway decent person. I think it's telling that, and he uses as his own defense, his empathy for other people. So, it's supposed to be uncomfortable. Empathy is evidence of the church to an unbelieving world. We're going to get into that in a second. We thank God for the ability to feel with one another. Right? Empathy is what gives us the desire to help. So we've talked about the words we say as a reflection of our hearts. The emotions that we feel are also a reflection of our heart. So, and those emotions that we feel give us the desire, give us the actual energy to do something about it. Right? Now, we can be uncomfortable in other people's situations and be empathetic towards them and move with them in empathy and trying to solve a problem or trying to walk with them down this road. Or we can use the energy of discomfort that we're feeling to hightail it, to get out quickly. But nevertheless, we need that emotion to put us in motion one way or the other. Right? If you just sat there emotionless while someone was pouring out their soul to you, you wouldn't be altogether that interested in moving one way or the other, right? You'd probably just get bored and wait until they were done talking, right? Wait until your meeting was over or you had to go somewhere else. But it's the emotion that actually gives you the energy to move in one direction or the other. So we thank God through his perfect and wise design, we do feel with each other so that we do have some emotion and therefore some energy to do something about or with someone else's issues. Y'all following there? You can go back and listen to the emotions seminar if you feel like you got caught up there. But so discomfort, though, can come from one or two places, possibly more, either because you're feeling with that person, because you're being empathetic with that person or towards that person, or your selfishness, right? You can say, this is just way too uncomfortable for me. That's why I'm feeling this discomfort. I'm not feeling it with you. I'm feeling it because this is messy. What you got going on here, that's tough. I'm uncomfortable. So in that situation, your emotions are going to work towards getting you back to safety. And safety being a more comfortable place, not in someone else's mess. So then we got to ask, why are you uncomfortable? Is it because you simply don't want to be bothered? I don't want to spend too much time on this, right? Because we can see, without too much explanation, how contrary this is to the gospel and to the example of Jesus, not wanting to be bothered with other people's problems. Is it because you're feeling with that person? Is it because you're being empathetic towards them in their situation? All right, we need to see this as God's design. The world will know us not by how many nice things we do for each other, but by our willingness to share in each other's victories and defeats, joys and tragedies. Right? Like Dwight actually was just talking about this morning. We hear situations people are in and we say, oh, cool. Oh, that's neat. Right? What has set us apart is that we take on their struggles as ours. We take on their victories as ours. Right? When Jesus says, the world will know you are my disciples by your love for each other, it's not that, it's just the group of people that are always together. You see them spending all this time together, right? It's their love for each other. It's their personal investment in each other's growth and godliness. And you can't personally and sacrificially invest in someone else without taking on their victories, but also their burdens and their tragedies and their sorrows, right? So, empathy. Is that why you're uncomfortable? Maybe the situation hits a little too close to home, right? Maybe you've just recently gone through this, or you still haven't gotten over a situation that you've been through that is similar to this, right? Take inventory here. It's good, forgot to mention, it's good that we ask ourselves, why am I uncomfortable, right? If you're uncomfortable because this is my best friend and what they're going through affects me, right? Because I don't want anyone of my friends to hurt like that. And so when they hurt, I hurt. How you answer that question, if you're willing to take the time and ask yourself, why is it that I am uncomfortable? It's gonna help give you clarity in what direction you want to go. And two, it's going to help you move forward in spite of that discomfort, if you can understand why it is that you're uncomfortable. So if this hits too close to home, one of the questions you need to ask yourself, can I be of help here? Is this actually something that I'm just not, I don't actually think I'm going to be able to help you or serve you in this moment because I haven't worked through my own stuff, or this is still just too fresh of a burden or too fresh of a wound. We mentioned this briefly, but for counselors, it's called countertransference. If the situation that you're hearing from your counselee is affecting you because it is reminds you of your childhood or your family design or dynamic, or a situation that happened to you, if you're working with someone who's dealt with abuse or trauma, and you likewise have dealt with abuse and trauma, and so their story is affecting you, the ethical thing to do is to say, I'd like for you to work with another counselor, right? And so we aren't bound by the American Counseling Association's ethics, but it's a question that we need to ask ourselves, right? Can I be objective in a biblical sense to provide truth and comfort and hope, even with as much as this hurts me at the moment? It's a fair question to ask yourself. Yeah.
I might be confused.
Okay.
Which is not.
Probably said something confusing or something more likely.
Not so useful. But you said as a counselor, you would send them to another counselor, but this could be just somebody in front of you that you're. Does the same thing happen?
It can. Or, like I said, and if the difference is that counselors have an ethics board, right? A governing board. So if someone said, this guy kept counseling through, me processing my father abusing me, and, his father was abused, and he was abused by his father, and he obviously hasn't worked through that. It affected our rapport, it affected our therapeutic relationship, it affected the counsel he gave me. Then I would be, under an ethical review because I should have said, yeah, I'm not altogether sure I'm going to be helpful, So a friend can say that, right? A friend can say, that hits close. I haven't dealt with my own stuff. We can try and deal with our stuff together, or is there maybe someone that we can both talk to, or at the very least, I'm just not 100% sure that I can be helpful. And you can say that, and you don't have to say that, right? There's no office to file a grievance, in a friendship, but you do, right? It's just something to be aware of. That's a good question, though. Thank you for asking for that clarification. Any other questions about anything so far? Okay, April.
As far as empathetic, if we're trying to be empathetic to someone else's
wasting your empathy on that person? That is a good question. I don't think empathy is ever wasted, right? Because what is empathy? It's you being willing to step into someone else's mess for their good. At the very least, you have displayed Christ-likeness. That will never go wasted. That's a good question, though. Very good question. You do have to set boundaries. You do have to draw lines at times, right? But your decision to not dismiss someone and to sacrificially step into their mess and feel what they're feeling with them, I don't think that could ever be a waste of time. Any other thoughts or questions? Situation is just too heavy, too messy. Oh, actually, one thing I did want to add about hitting too close to home. Remember, in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, Paul says that him and the apostles were afflicted so that they could be comforted by God, so that they in turn could comfort others in their affliction, right? And so if it hits too close to home, that might be the very reason why it's hitting close, right? Because it's a similar situation that you've been through. You've experienced God's hope and God's comfort, and for that reason, you are able to then pass on God's hope and comfort, right? Paul says this is why we were afflicted, so that we could understand and experience the process of what it means when we say that God is the God of all comfort and God is the God of all hope. We only know that because we have been afflicted, and he has shown himself in that way to us. And part of our message is to show him to you guys in that way as well. Situation is too heavy or too messy. Whatever the reason, we have an opportunity here. You can still be effective while being uncomfortable. We do this by remembering our challenge and our calling for relationships. God intends to use them as the context for bringing about the change that we all need. Okay? So, even after considering all that, we haven't given you a formula for what to say in various situations, right? So, when you don't know what to say, a couple thoughts. One, ask them. It's important first to remember that you don't have to have the right answer. This isn't do or die. If your motive is to help, there is a small chance that the words you speak will be relationship ending. Okay? Right? So if your motive is right and your love for your brother or sister is pure and genuine, the words that you say, however wrong or off they might be, it's probably not relationship ending. It's probably not going to be relationship ending. Most people are going to understand where this is coming from, where this advice or counsel or your response is coming from, and it's coming from a person who cares, a person who is just trying to help. So it's not necessarily that you have the right answer or you've blown it, okay? Ask them what would be most helpful, right? I mean, that is a great place to start. We jump that step in this whole process quite often for whatever reason. But what would be most helpful? What would you like from me? Do you want support? Do you want advice? Do you want me to tell you what I think? Do you want me to pray with you? Do you want me to go with you to XYZ, whatever, right? Ask them, what is it that you think would be most helpful in this situation? If you're helping them according to what they feel like they need, unless it's immoral or illegal, obviously, then you're doing the right thing, right? According to what they think will help them most, then you're probably doing the right thing, right? Like I said, unbiblical, illegal, immoral, obviously, that doesn't count. But put aside everything you know, right? If they say, can we just meet again and can I tell you some more? The answer is yes. The answer isn't, no, we got to get this thing figured out, right? Even if you're sitting there listening saying, oh, man, you need to do this, and why didn't you do this, and you need to make this phone call, and what they tell you they need is just someone to listen, then that's where you're at, okay? And that's a good place to start if you don't know what to say. Say it. It's okay, right? If they're being vulnerable with you, you have the right to be vulnerable with them. It's okay that you don't know what to say. It's okay to tell them that you don't know what to say. It's okay to say, yikes, I was not expecting this. I'm a little taken aback. I'm sorry. I need a minute, or I need a moment, or can I think about this? But I just don't have anything for you right now as far as advice or counsel or next steps or whatever that might be. And that's okay, right? Because that is working deeper in your relationship, that you're able to say, I'm not just going to give you something light and fluffy. I'm not going to give you some Christian platitude. After hearing, truly listening to what you've told me, I don't have a response right now. And that's okay, right? That will land on softer ears than you think. Does that make sense? Be honest about how much you know. Be honest about how much you know. Right? I've only dealt with this one time before, or I'm not familiar with situations like that. That's okay. We're setting the groundwork for how you and this person are going to move forward. Chances are this isn't a one-time, a one-time deal where you come to me or I come to you and I get all my questions answered and we never have to talk about it again, right? So if you're setting the stage, if you're laying the groundwork with transparency, vulnerability, honesty, you are laying groundwork for true growth and true thriving for a relationship, and true problem solving for whatever situation they may be going through. Okay? So be honest. Speak from your own experience, right? But make sure they know that. This is just what I've gone through. This is just how I handled this. This is just the way I went about things. You're not setting up rules and absolutes for, oh yeah, this is the way to deal with this, right? It's okay to say this is what worked for me. It's okay to say this is what I did, and it actually didn't work. So I wouldn't necessarily suggest that for you, or maybe it would work for you, but it didn't work for me. But again, keeping in line with being honest and open, you speak from your own experience, but letting the person know that that is just your experience. Offer long-term support. Most of the time, unless they specifically ask for it, they aren't just looking for advice about how to fix their marriage or fix their situation or fix their kids, right? They're looking for support in the midst of that struggle. Okay, so, in our hypothetical that we've been working off of, I'm not coming to you because I need you to give me the 10 best marriage tips you have, and I'm going to take them home. And I understand that as a result of this conversation and the advice you gave me, things will be better. That's probably not my expectation of the conversation that we're having, right? But what will speak volumes more than any words is offering that long-term support. To be able to say, hey, what you're going through is going to be a long haul. What you're going through is going to be uncomfortable, and it's going to be uncomfortable for a while. But now that you've shared that with me, now that you've brought me into this grief and this burden with you, I'm going to walk with you, right? And that can be continual conversations. That can be checking up on the other. That can also be, continuing the conversation in other ways after you've physically met, right? Sending a card, sending a text, sending an email. Hey, I'm thinking about you. Hey, I read this article today and reminded me of you. I wanted to share it with you. Whatever, just letting them know that you didn't consider their sharing with you what they're going through a one-time deal, right? That you considered that to be very valuable and very important and very vulnerable of them, and so you want to continue with them on that path. Russ.
The bullet point you just stated is kind of like the most important thing that should come first, because if you look at Job's friends as an example, right, we don't want to be like James said. We don't want to look at somebody going through this and be like, hey, be warm and filled, right? But you look at Job's friends, and first they sat and mourned with him, and then he started talking about this stuff, and they're like, man, I don't know if I'm going to be around for it. Come on, man. It's like, if we can express to somebody, look, you have metaphorically fallen into a hole, I'm going to jump down in there with you. So, I mean, either we're both stuck, or both getting out of here, but I'm not going anywhere. And that speaks volumes to the person, I mean, from my own personal experience, being in the hole in some really bad places, speaks volumes to the person who's hurting. Like, man, no matter how bad it gets, even if it gets worse, I know they're not going away. They're not going to be like, oh, we're this guy, it's like, they're going to be there. And that's at least half of the, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And I would say, I don't know, off the top of the head, maybe half of the people that I've worked with have expressed the lack of this. Right? I went through a bad divorce and I lost all my friends, or I lost my job and all my coworkers stopped talking to me, and whatever it is. I moved churches because of something that happened, and now everyone from that church thinks I've fallen away from the faith or something like that, right? So most of the time, this is a pretty common experience for someone who's really gone through something messy in their life. And so remembering that if they're opening up to you, that's very intentional. They weren't just scanning the room and like, who can I talk? Oh, April's not talking to anyone. I can go talk to her, right? No, this is very intentional. This is a very selective process. This is the person that I feel like I can share this with. And whether stated or not, one of the expectations of that process of sharing is going to be, I hope you're around, right? I hope sharing this with you didn't scare you off. I hope sharing this with you didn't cause you to judge me or see me in a different way than you previously did. Right? I share this with you in hopes that we can bear this together for the long haul, for as long as it takes. Yeah, good, Russ. Thank you. Suggest to read. Offer to read it with them. Right? Oh, I just heard about this really good book. We could, if you'd be interested, we could meet together and read it. Read a chapter a week and meet together and talk about it. Right? I've seen this used a lot, even just throughout the church. I've seen this really provide some flourishing relationships where people gather together around a central topic and go through a book. I've seen this work firsthand. And then referral, right? I hear there's a good counseling ministry here, so, right? So, and I say that jokingly, but that's always okay. That's always, that's what we're here for, right? We want to be a safety net for when you guys are in these situations and say, and you do say, man, I'm not really sure what to say, or I've never really gone through anything like this, or I'm not familiar with those types of challenges, but our church has a counseling ministry, right? Or if you know a personal counselor, or if you're going to a counselor and you want to refer them there, whatever, right? It's just another option of helping that person get through what they're getting through. That's all we're trying to provide in these conversations. Avoid saying something just to say something, right? People do this. I've seen it. I've looked in people's eyes and thought to myself, you're just trying to come up with something, right? You're just trying to come up with something to say right now. Whether we don't want to sound stupid or we want to come off as really knowledgeable or really helpful, whatever it is, to protect our reputation or to escape whatever discomfort we find ourselves in, we'll say something, right? Fight that urge. It's not always helpful. Fight that urge. On the contrary, like we've talked about, learn to be okay in the silence, right? Those are important moments of meaningful conversations. So avoid saying something just to feel helpful or valuable or smart. Avoid imposing your way, right? My goal in any counseling session is not that anyone would leave there and encounter more challenges and think, what would Chris say or what would Chris do, right? I want to point them to biblical truth that will work not just for whatever they're in, but will provide a template or a process that can be applied to whatever else life throws their way down the road, right? My goal in relationship, especially counseling relationship. My goal is to provide tools that will equip them for a Godward journey. Right? It's not that we sit down and we figure this thing out and all your problems are solved by the time you leave, right? Because that's easy. Right? When I worked in the addictions field, I said, if my goal was to teach you how not to use drugs anymore, I can hand you a packet and we can read through it and we can make this 1-year program a 7-day program and you guys can be on your way, right? But that is, one, that's not the problem, and two, that's definitely not the solution, right? And so even when we feel like we're giving it advice or counsel, or when someone asks specifically, what do you think? What would you advise? What would your counsel be? It needs to not be something specific to that moment, right? It can be applied specifically, but it needs to be something that is going to positively affect their Godward journey for the rest of their life, right? And so one thing that really helps take the pressure off, even as a counselor and even in just these conversations, one thing that really helps take the pressure off is that the words I say don't have to be effective that moment, right? Because some water, or some plant, some water, God gets the increase, right? The words that I say might ring true to someone's experience in 5 years. And that's okay. That's God getting the increase. That really helps relieve the pressure of those moments. Any thoughts or comments, questions on any of that? Yeah, Nancy.
You know, mentioning that I've had a couple of occasions in my years where I was called to come be with somebody, and when I got there, my need was just to be silent. And I spent a whole night with somebody who never said a word. And that's what they want.
Yep. I've read accounts of professional counselors where the counselee didn't want to talk, and the counselor wasn't just going to say something just to say something, so it was 55 minutes of silence. And then at 55 minutes, the counselor said, well, same time next week, right? And they came back. So, yeah. Yeah, exactly. They should charge more for those sessions. But so avoid imposing your way. So you guys all understand where I'm coming from as far as that's concerned? They have all the information, you don't. Giving them a way to use that information is far better than telling them which way to go. Okay? So you want to give them a way to use the information that they have, because you can't possibly know everything that they know. You aren't going to be able to interpret the nuances and the subtleties of whatever conversation or challenge that they're in, right? The subtleties and the nuances of the relationship that they're having trouble with, whether it be at work or at home or wherever, school, wherever the case may be. There's too much that you could not possibly know about their challenge in order for you to say, this is exactly what you need to do, right? How many times have you tried that and someone said, yeah, but you don't know this other person, or yeah, but you don't know how they'll respond, or yeah, but you don't know my boss, right? Or yeah, but my work schedule isn't really set up that way. There's always a yeah, but, right? So, and that usually comes when you're trying to tell someone this is what you need to do, and what they're telling you is you don't really know, but that's not really going to work, right? So what you want to do is give them a way to use the information that they have, instead of assuming that you have all the information you need to tell them what to do next. Okay? Does that come across as unhelpful or wrong? No? Okay.
We're here.
Yeah, Russ.
Good illustration from this morning with the last meeting. It's not like they show up and be like, all right, here's what we're going to do. They show up and they're like, hey man, this week we need, foundation needs fixed? Got it. Toilet's broken? Got it. They show up prepared and ready to help and let the person who needs help dictate to them what needs to be done.
Yeah.
There's actually like a whole little blurb I came up with years ago called The Law of the Helper. It dictates this, but I don't remember what it is. I'm trying to get it to right now.
Okay.
But basically the essence of, man, I just want to help so bad, and I know that you need this.
Yeah.
Right? It's not your place to say that.
Yeah.
You have to come alongside them and let them tell you,
Yeah.
hey, help me get forward in this way.
And of course, we do, that is not to say that it's not helpful to be the outsider, right, who is an observer to the situation before you and able to see with, clear eyes and untainted eyes or objective eyes, right? So it's not to dismiss that, but it's far more helpful and has much more longevity when you give them the help according to them in a way that is suitable for the long run, okay? All right. Paul Tripp says that language is not a human invention to be used in whatever way serves our interests. If God is the first speaker, then language is his creation. That means that our ability to speak was given to us by the Creator, and it exists for his glory. So we want to be aware of the components that make up these conversations so that we can be most effective when we have these opportunities. But remember, this isn't formulaic, right? This isn't, okay, I'm supposed to listen, and then I'm supposed to ask questions, and then I'm supposed to discern the need, right? All of this is usually happening simultaneously. But now, hopefully, you have categories for what should be happening during these conversations, right? That was really the point here, so that you have categories of the main components of being effective in conversation, in relationships during these times. Then you'll find yourself more comfortable in those situations. You'll even find yourself, I don't want to say seeking them out, but that idea of going up to someone, instead of waiting for someone to come to you, going up to someone and say, hey, you seem off today, right? You seem a little down, or you're just not being yourself, whatever the case may be. You want to grab a coffee after work, or do you want to eat lunch together, whatever the case may be, right? When you become more comfortable in these types of situations, when you have more experience in these situations, you don't necessarily wait from you. You start seeing them as God's tool for equipping the saints, for thriving relationships and helping each other walk in Christ's likeness. And so we become more comfortable, and we see those opportunities more often than we used to. And, something, just in conclusion here, something that really hit me this morning, all the praying we did about all the situations this morning, right, with the Bradleys and the Romaines and the Ignashevskis and our churches around the area and our churches across the world that we've been praying about for a while, that is all proof, that's all evidence that these conversations are happening, right? People, you think the Romaines don't need someone to talk to, right? You think John and Adrian don't need someone to just be there for them for a little while, right? To lift them up, to provide that healing that we talked about this morning. It is all over. It is all over. And if we feel comfortable and more equipped to step into those conversations and have those conversations with people, we'll see how great the need is and how effective God plans to be with our conversations. Okay? Any other comments or thoughts?
You and I have talked about this, and not to minimize what you're doing at all, but when would you say it's appropriate for someone to say, let me bring my pastor in, or to come to, I'm thinking, I'd like to do what you're doing. So where do you see any kind of divide between what the pastors are doing and what you're doing?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, and that's something that we're working through just as a ministry. When do we determine, like, hey, this actually does need to be brought to the pastoral staff, or vice versa? When does the pastor hear something and say, actually, you should probably talk to one of our counselors, right? And fundamentally, it's what we call scope of practice, or just where do you feel most comfortable, right? If this is like, man, Rich loves to work with people who are experiencing a specific problem, right? And he feels like God has equipped him to be effective, to walk with people through that specific issue, and he's seen it, victory experience time and time again. Whereas someone else an experienced pastor might say, I've never felt comfortable walking with someone through that, and then there's a counselor for that, hopefully, ideally. So it's really, your comfort level, your experience level, scope of practice, right? It's a good question. Any other questions? Yes.
Just a thought. The Apostle Paul started the church at Corinth, and he loved those people. I don't know if they knew that when he said to them things like, the things that you're doing are not even so much as named among the Gentiles.
Yeah.
He was so confrontational that their response to him was to insult him, revile him, embarrass him. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, he said to them, O ye Corinthians, our mouth is opened unto you, our heart is enlarged. That seems to be saying, we have opened our hearts to you, and right now there's room in our hearts for you. No matter how you respond, faithful are the wounds of a friend. And Peter mentions that when Jesus was reviled, he reviled not again. Someone who's a confrontational counselor is going to get that. He's going to get insulted, or these things are going to be said. But we have the example of Jesus. We have the example of Paul. Even James said in chapter 3 that if any man sin not in his words, that man is a perfect man, or a complete, mature man, and able also to bridle the whole body.
Yeah.
That's a test of maturity.
Yeah.
That you have control over your words, so that when you're in a counseling situation, when you are in a friendship situation or a marital situation, your words count.
Yeah.
And they show whether you're mature spiritually or immature. And a lot of times we don't want to admit that maybe we're saying something immature.
Yeah, sometimes we don't like those indications. And if you go on in 2 Corinthians chapter 7, you see Paul's response to his confrontation, his own reaction to the confrontation. He says, I'm glad I said what I said. It might have hurt, and I didn't want to hurt you, but I'm glad I hurt you, right? He's kind of going back and forth. He's like, but look what happened as a result, right? And so you can say that Paul's and the other apostles' motivation for that confrontation was their growth, right, and their godliness. And so he says, I know it hurt, and I'm glad it hurt, and I wish it didn't hurt, but I'm glad it happened because of look what happened, right? He says,
convinced that you love them, they're going to listen to you.
yeah,
They will at least listen to you. Even an unsaved person might give you the opportunity to share the gospel with them. They may not accept it right away, but if someone that is seeking help and you're having to say some hard things to them, if they really know that you love them and you've shown that love to them, I think you have a good chance of having them receive what you're saying.
a lot more liberty in those conversations. Absolutely. That's why the first thing for a counselor is establishing rapport. Right? That is the first most important thing from the first phone call or the first email you get. You are building rapport towards letting that person know, I care about you, and what you share with me will only be used out of my care for you for your good, right? From the first email or the first phone call. So it's important. Good. Very good. All right, let's pray. Father, we thank you for this time, this 3 weeks that you've given us to study this matter. God, we know how important and how weighty this matter is to you, knowing that our control of the way we communicate and the words that we say is an indication of our control of our being. God, our desires and our hearts. And so, Lord, we pray that this was a profitable time. We pray that our objectives here were accomplished, that we might feel more comfortable and be equipped to be more effective for your kingdom, for your glory in these relationships, specifically in these types of conversations. God, I pray that you were glorified, that you were pleased with what has been happening here, and that we might have grown as a result of it. And it's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.